Though it sounds like a bad horror movie, Zombie Genocider is an achievement you earn in the first Dead Rising, a different zombie franchise. The Dead Rising series is a whole different ballgame than Left 4 Dead.
One angry daddy!
The first Left 4 Dead game decided to reference its old zombie slaying counterpart, featuring an achievement called Zombie Genocidist. When Dead Rising 2 eventually rolled around in 2010, it fired back with a new achievement, Z Genocider 2, Genocide Harder. After this, it seemed that Dead Rising had the last laugh, until a recent Left 4 Dead 2 update where a new achievement was made available, Z Genocidist 2 Episode 2. Have you guys ever been playing one of the Left 4 Dead games and then got that creepy feeling of being watched? Don't worry, you're actually not crazy. Probably, I don't know you. The AI director, or director as some people call it, is most likely what's causing these feelings. It's a pretty advanced AI, especially for the time that Left 4 Dead came out in. It's the main reason Left 4 Dead is so replayable. Essentially, the AI director is a machine learning AI, meaning it uses the information that's present in order to learn and adapt to its environment. It does this using various algorithms and bits of code. It affects everything that's spawnable, like zombies, weapons, medkits, even things like cars with car alarms. It does all of this by taking the data from players that's available and uses it to shake things up. An example can be like, if a team is doing super well, the director will compute this and begin to spawn less medkits, weapons, and spawn more special infected. And on the other side of the coin, a team who isn't doing as well will receive more health kits or weapons to help them through the campaign. It can even affect the actual campaign levels or environments. Some cases of this are like in the mall level of Dead Center, where the path to the alarm event can be changed to either starting in a toy store or a maintenance tunnel, or in the cemetery level of the parish campaign. The amount of gravestones can actually be changed, meaning that the survivors will have a tougher time traversing the gravesite, or it'll be a walk in the park. Well, cemetery. The Midnight Riders are probably one of my favorite fictional bands. Like, whoever made their in-game discography deserves an applause, not only for the rocking tunes they were able to make, but also because of the secrets they hid in a few select earworms. The most interesting one in my opinion is hidden in the song Save Me Some Sugar. Listening to the song regularly, you'll be able to hear some sort of gibberish at one point. Do some reversing and you'll get the phrase "Bill is dead." An obvious nod to the fact that Bill from the first game sacrificed himself. This is believed to be inspired by the real-life urban legend that revolves around the Beatles. The legend goes that in several of their songs lie hidden messages about one of the band's members, Paul McCartney, and how he's actually dead. The little Easter eggs continue in the same song, with lines like,
The bus is on the road, sweet Georgia fades away.
mirroring the sequel survivors' efforts to escape Georgia. The bombing of New Orleans by the military is also referenced in the song too.
We'll be burning down Louisiana by the very next day. No sleep will never.
One more Easter egg involving the band's music could be that their album, 10 Past Midnight, is likely a reference to the Iron Maiden song, 2 Minutes to Midnight. A very often forgotten fact is that both Portal and Half-Life have movie adaptations in the works. A couple years ago, J.J. Abrams, a close friend of Gabe Newell, talked about adapting several of Valve's IPs into films. After hearing about this, many people in the community theorized that Left 4 Dead would potentially get a film. Unfortunately though, Abrams has revealed that the Valve movies have been put on the back burner But if your hunger for a zombie killing movie can't wait, then YouTube has you covered. There are actually some surprisingly well-made fan films about Left 4 Dead, such as one quaintly called Left 4 Dead, the movie. It was filmed over in Italy and was released in 2016. It's honestly a very fun watch. 2016 seemed to be a pretty popular year for foreign Left 4 Dead films to be made, as Left 4 Dead Genesis started off in that year as well. A 4-part series, Genesis revolves around the origins of the Left 4 Dead 1 survivors, and serves as a sort of prequel to the first game. A more loose fan film, based off of the game, is one called Left 4 Dead, Impulse 76, where the survivors from the first game team up with other famous game characters, like Master Chief from Halo, Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, and others. While we know that Nick is a dick and also a gambler, we don't really know what his life was like before the green flu outbreak. But originally this information was going to be handed to us. In the developer commentary of Left 4 Dead 2, one of the devs talked about the origins of Nick's character, talking about how he originally was going to be an escaped convict who decided to steal a suit. Many people have adopted this as their headcanon for Nick's life pre-apocalypse. Liminal spaces are hard to describe. Have you ever been on a long car trip passing through a lonesome stretch of road? Or have you ever had to stay late at school during the winter, the early nightfall giving the school an eerie atmosphere? These are examples of liminal spaces. The term liminal spaces has many different definitions, but it is most used to describe environments that cause specific feelings, such as feelings of nostalgia, discomfort, or time slowing down, areas that feel anomalous in general. For some reason, liminality can often be found in games that use the Source engine. I'm pretty sure most of you have seen the rise of Garry's Mod ARGs in the last year that make use of the lonely or spooky feeling that can be commonly experienced when playing Garry's Mod alone, especially older versions. Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 also are able to create the liminal phenomenon. In the few quiet moments between gibbing zombies, you might be lucky enough to experience one of these happening. If you wanted to try and force this to happen, I'd suggest playing Dead Center or No Mercy, as the mall and hospital tend to have a more uncanny vibe than the other campaigns. Dead by Daylight is a horror spin on the classic game of hide and seek. A team of survivors must hide from a killer, using perks and teamwork in order to complete objectives and escape. The game features a ton of licensed characters, like Michael Myers from Halloween, Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street, Ash Williams from the Kick-Ass Evil Dead series, and Bill. Wait, Bill? Yeah, Bill from Left 4 Dead's in the game. With a new look, too. Which is weird because he should have died in the sacrifice. Which is where this theory comes in. Looking at Dead by Daylight's lore, the realm that the game takes place in is a sort of sandbox for the Dimension's owner, the Entity. Each survivor and killer in Dead by Daylight is a canonical addition to that universe. With the fact that the Entity, the big bad who controls the Dead by Daylight realm, seems to have no limits to who it can and cannot kidnap and force into its twisted version of hide and seek. It's very likely that, yeah, this is where Bill ended up. So with all of this taken into account, it's a kind of sorta situation. The universe of Left 4 Dead doesn't have a concrete connection to the universe of Dead by Daylight, but due to the unlimited power of the Entity, it doesn't need to. The Entity can take anyone from any universe or timeline at once, making this a very one-sided situation. I actually just found this out while researching the Iceberg. Okay, so, originally, this entry was going to be about the crowbar that you might have missed in the Last Stand campaign. If you want to find this crowbar, before heading up to the junkyard, go ahead and take a sharp right, and then another, and then another. You should come face to face with the red door. It'll take a lot of hits with a melee weapon, but eventually it should break apart, revealing a dead dude sitting at a desk with a computer on it. An interesting feature is that the computer is highlighted. Interact with it, and you'll earn your very own golden crowbar. Now, this is the part that I didn't know. There's more golden crowbars than just this one. There's around 22 of them. Finding all of these will net you the Golden Freeman achievement, an obvious reference to Gordon Freeman from Half-Life. He usually uses a crowbar as a weapon. I'm not going to give out the exact locations because that just takes out the fun of finding them all. Chicago Ted is the writer of some pieces of graffiti in the first game's safe rooms, such as lines like, "No zombie is safe from Chicago Ted." The character gained a bit of a cult following in the fanbase, making him out to be some badass zombie killer. But he's never seen in-game. So whenever a survivor dies, it's usually thought that they simply respawn in a closet, right? Nothing too big, just an in-game feature that has no effect on the lore of the franchise. Well, there are actually some explanations for this made to make it more realistic. My personal favorite is from a developer commentary. One of the devs talks about how the survivors actually don't die. They just get beaten to a pulp and then crawl into a closet in order to recover, not noticing the fact that they lock themselves in it. The idea sounds like a comedy sketch or something. It's also stated on the wiki that the rescuing of closeted survivors was supposed to represent a lone survivor joining the group trope. That's something that's commonly seen in zombie media. No, this is not the name of a very edgy Modern Warfare clan or some gang in Gmod Dark RP, but an actual group in the Left 4 Dead universe, though they are never seen. The first time you can hear about the Angels of Death is on some graffiti in the campaign Crash Course, and again in the Sacrifice campaign. They're the largest group of non-military survivors we see in both games, having around 8 members when the Sacrifice campaign rolls around. Disregarding the edgy name, they seem to be a pretty solid group of people, dedicating themselves to clearing the way for survivors by killing any zombie they come across. If that's what they're deciding to do as a hobby, I mean, good for them, but could they try to do their whole killing every zombie thing better? Cause the campaigns they show up in are absolutely infested with infected. Can't just say something like that and not deliver. Honestly, just thinking about it, it's more likely that instead of this being a group of zombie killing badasses, they're actually just a bunch of mall ninja neckbeards who think of themselves as these absolutely kick-ass dudes. It'd definitely explain the name and the lack of zombie slaughter. It's pretty hard to think that Left 4 Dead 2 was initially wanted to be boycotted by a sizable part of the community at one point, but surprisingly it's true. This movement started shortly after the announcement of a sequel game. It was actually so big, several gaming news outlets reported on it. Their complaints were actually heard by Valve though. One of their demands from Valve was for Left 4 Dead 1 to continue being supported, which it was. Updates and maps continuing to be released for the first game, long after the sequel's launch. Their whole deal was they felt that Left 4 Dead didn't have enough time to shine. It was only a year since it was released and already a sequel was in the works, and the announcement of a sequel made loyal fans to the first game afraid that they were being abandoned, which is honestly an understandable fear. Their Steam group is actually still up. If you want to check out their discussions and reasoning for the boycott, go ahead, I'll leave a link to it in the description. I was honestly surprised it was still around, but I think it's a really cool find. It's almost like a time capsule from an era long past, but it's definitely dead. No one has really been active in it recently. Payday is a cooperative crime first-person shooter made by Overkill Software back in 2011. It's a series with a surprising amount of lore to be found, and some of the lore connects to Left 4 Dead. The biggest connecting string between the two franchises is the No Mercy heist. The No Mercy heist features the Payday gang invading a location from Left 4 Dead, Mercy Hospital. The entire point of the heist is to steal a blood sample from a patient with a rare virus, hinted at to be patient 0 of the green flu. The entire mission has Easter egg after Easter egg connected to Left 4 Dead, such as references to Sita, a witch appearing to jump scare the crew, Bill showing up at the start of the campaign, bodies in the morgue twitching, the heisters showing symptoms of being infected, and more. This heist originally wasn't canon, but was retconned into being canon in the sequel, Payday 2, confirming their connected universes. The lack of infected appearing in the second game could be due to the infection not spreading that far yet, and still being quarantined by Sita. The witch actually goes on to appear in several other missions as an Easter egg. In many games, the community that surrounds it will often change or play with the personality of different characters, sometimes over-exaggerating parts of their personalities, or giving them an entirely new identity. Some places this can be seen is within like the Five Nights at Freddy's fandom, and their interpretations of the animatronics. This is no different with Left 4 Dead, but possibly the weirdest example of a Left 4 Dead character being transformed by the community in this way would be Coach. A long-running trend in the community is to basically make Coach into a weird and often Lovecraftian shitpost, which has resulted in some iconic memes that have not only become popular in the base community, but has even extended and become popular in others as well. While it's hard to trace this back to the exact origin, I feel that this was most likely started by the series Tasty Cools, created by self-proclaimed Coach worshipper Sibmaz. The story of Tasty Cools stars Nick's attempts to outrun a godlike Coach, hell-bent on not only eating him, but also on toying with him as well. The series is remarkable for many reasons, not only for breaking the mold of other Garry's Mod series and showing how much can be done with the program, but also for telling an actually competent story with characters that, although are mainly centered around being comedic, go through genuine character growth and development. Like, my favorite part of the series is when Francis sacrifices himself to save Nick.
Good luck, my brother.
No! Go!
Like, in the context, the idea of a greasy biker dude sacrificing himself for a sleazy con man in order for him to escape on a helicopter co-piloted by a redneck mechanic in an attempt to escape an omnipotent cannibalistic football coach is absolutely off the wall. But the scene is played out in a manner that not only understands how silly the situation is, but also still manages to tug on the viewer's heartstrings. The world of Tasty Cools is one of my favorite examples of community adaptation, and has cemented Sibmaz, in my opinion, as not only a great animator, but also one of the greatest storytellers in the Left 4 Dead community's atmosphere.
I ain't even had time to eat.
So far in the Left 4 Dead series, there have been 3 games. Yes, you heard me right, 3 games. Left 4 Dead 1, Left 4 Dead 2, and Left 4 Dead Survivors. Left 4 Dead Survivors was a Japanese exclusive arcade game that was officially endorsed by Valve. It launched back in 2014. The game is an entirely different experience than the prior games, introducing things like timed gameplay, which makes sense. This is an arcade game, and it isn't cool to just hog a cabinet. From what I can understand, players had to continue to insert credits when prompted to keep the timer going. If the timer reaches 0, It would give the players one last chance to buy themselves more time, before being assaulted by the endlessly spawning tanks. Other gameplay changes include the addition of a shop where players could spend in-game currency called ZG points to unlock outfits, weapons, and special items they could use during campaigns. Unique items in Infected could be obtained or seen during in-game events that players could partake in which the players had to complete certain challenges in order to receive special prizes. Besides this, new survivors were brought in to be more palatable for Japanese audiences. These survivors include, and I'm very sorry if I butcher these names, Yusuke Kudo, Haruka Hirose, Sara Kirishima, and finally Blake Jordan. Each of these survivors are given their own unique quirks to help make them feel unique from their American counterparts. For instance, Blake will often talk about worrying about his dog he has back home, and Sarah and Haruka had a connection to each other before the outbreak happened, with Sarah being a tour guide for Haruka's school trip. The game features all campaigns except the Last Stand campaign that came with the recent DLC. This is due to the online features of the game eventually becoming unsupported in 2017, leaving it only able to be played in single player and local multiplayer. It's pretty hard to play the actual arcade game since it is exclusive to Japan, but you should be able to create a version that's fairly similar to it. Back in 2019, the game's files were dumped onto the internet, allowing players to bring over many of the arcade's unique features into the first two games as mods. I mean, do I need to really explain this? It's all in the title. It's the end times foretold in the Bible. The rapture has come, the dead have come to life, and the oceans have turned to blood.
Old Testament, Mr. Mayor. Real wrath of God type stuff.
Exactly.
Fire and brimstone coming down from the skies. Rivers and seas boiling.
40 years of darkness, earthquakes, volcanoes.
The dead rising from the grave.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
There's a fair amount of religious symbolism in both games, like the cemetery or the church, or Coach calling the group to pray for not only their safety, but the safety of a mall's food court. It doesn't totally match up to the Christian interpretation of how it all ends, but it could have just been an adaptation or just not true at all. I don't see any locusts or people getting beamed up to heaven, so I don't think the theory has a lot going for it. Maybe the idea is that God just got sick of humanity, so he created the green flu. That would explain its almost supernatural immunity to any attempts of stopping it, and the almost demonic looking mutations that are caused by it. The glowing eyes of the common infected, the witch's crazy weird claws, and the smoker's almost infinitely long tongue. During the Dark Carnival ending, there's a chance that Ellis can say the following lines.
Man, this is gonna be like the 4th time the Midnight Riders have saved my life.
This is a pretty strange line, considering that Ellis never talks about meeting the Midnight Riders personally. He does talk about seeing one of their shows in person, but I don't think they did anything to save him at that show, as Ellis, being the chatterbox he is, probably would have talked about it. There's been many cases of people in a pretty bad part of their life finding inspiration to continue living from media. This can be songs, games, movies, etc. So maybe Ellis has had a pretty rough life, and used the Midnight Rider songs to cope with his struggle, in a way, saving him. One of the largest parts of the Left 4 Dead community would most likely belong to the speedrunners. With how linear the campaigns are, it's no surprise this group rose in prominence, and the most famous of this group would most likely be Komchik, a content creator on YouTube. Over time, however, what he was truly like as a person began to show. The controversies surrounding Komchik have always been present, though only in recent years have they gotten widespread attention. So what did Komchik do? Well, the main thing is his cheating. If the videos were just him having fun in the game with no real objective, this wouldn't be a problem. But it's important to remember that these were used in videos specifically centered around a certain objective, such as trying to complete a level under a certain time limit, or not taking any damage at all in various campaigns. Him doing this not only makes the challenge have no point since he isn't playing fair, but also tricks the audience watching into thinking he's way more skilled than he actually is, often leading to support and praise that he doesn't deserve nor earned. His videos aren't the only thing he lies about either. A long-running lie he's tried to keep up is that he has multiple speedrunning world records. But the evidence he provides for this is barely even worthy enough to be called evidence. And with how often he just doesn't care about the rules set by the speedrunning community, it's hard to believe he's ever actually had a legitimate run. For more context, Komchik only used an in-game timer for his Left 4 Dead world records, even though the game's timer is faulty and doesn't display the correct time. But hey, maybe he's trying to hold the world record for being the most dickless Left 4 Dead player ever, as he decided to be even more scummy and straight up steal people's art. Hell, pretty much all of his thumbnails are stolen, uncredited art. Even when artists have confronted him and asked for credit or for him to take the thumbnail off, he just ignores them and continues to use their work. I don't think I need to explain how stealing people's art is wrong, especially when he's profiting off of other people's property without giving them a cent. Since he uses these pieces of art as thumbnails, they're one of the biggest things that draw people to his content, the content he makes money off of. There's been all sorts of supposed special infected from the rumored third game leaked. But there is one that's most likely not a hoax. Back in 2016, Valve released something called the HTC Vive benchmark tool. Contained in it were several references and assets related to Left 4 Dead 3. One of them being the Nocturnal, a special infected that was supposed to come out only at night, and would have worked in tandem with the game's new day/night cycle. But no more information about this supposed new zombie was found in the leak. The Left 4 Dead 2 Steam Workshop is home to a variety of Left 4 Dead mods that enhance the game or, well, make it worse. Some of the most acclaimed mods is the Aftermath series. It's a whole set of skins for the survivors that give them a new wardrobe, making them look like they'd fit right in with Rick Grimes' gang in the later seasons of The Walking Dead. The unique take on the survivors and general quality of the mods caused the collection to quickly become a favorite among the community, even inspiring some other mods in its wake. Unfortunately, the devs of the mod never released an Aftermath skin for literally the best survivor in both games, Coach. There were concept models made, but the devs stopped working on the Aftermath mods after launching the Bill skin, much to the disapproval of the fanbase that had formed around them. Since the mods were such high quality, however, the community uses it as a sort of compliment whenever a new well-made Coach skin is released, basically meaning that whatever Coach mod they're talking about is so good, it could have been Aftermath Coach. When I was younger, I was super into this channel called Tats Top Tens. If you grew up with creepypastas, the name definitely rings a bell, as the channel is well known for the extensive catalog of videos ranking many of the horror stories that fall under the umbrella of being a creepypasta or urban legend. Along with this, the channel also covers other topics, mostly being related to video games in some way. In one of the channel's older videos, Top 22 Scariest Glitches in Gaming, a glitch in Left 4 Dead 2 is documented. The glitch for some reason replaces one of the trucks found in Dead Center's second level interior with a giant stretched out jockey face, grinning at the player. Stuck in Savannah was a unique take on the Left 4 Dead story. It centered around Nick and Ellis, trapped together in places like hotel rooms, apartments. At one point they even got captured by Sita. Even though it had shippy undertones and humor unique to that time.
Is that the super kawaii Desu Hunter?
I think it's still pretty standoutish, and I wasn't the only one. It attracted a rather large audience to it, and got so large that even conventions began letting them host their own panels. The meat wall would have been a new boss special infected in Left 4 Dead 2 that was later cut. Not much is known about it except some concept art. This thing would have been huge, probably taller than the tank. I have a theory that the meat wall could have potentially inspired the ogre from Back 4 Blood, as both of them are larger than life boss special infected. From the concept art, it looks like the meat wall would have thrown survivors, which is one of the ogre's main attacks, showing even more connections between the two zombies. When looking up videos about Left 4 Dead on places like YouTube, you're most likely going to find a lot of content centered around mods, especially custom campaigns like Deathcraft 2, that one McDonald's survival map, or the map that this entry is focusing on, Helms Deep, and its surprisingly malicious history. The map is obviously based off of the same fortress from the Lord of the Rings franchise, and is one of the most popular survival maps in the community. So for me to say that it has an often unspoken dark side might seem pretty off, so I should probably explain what I'm talking about. So, what's so bad about the map? Simply put, it makes the game shit the bed. Through the use of malicious code hidden in the mod's files, it slowly begins to strip away key features of the entire game, restricting downloaders from doing things as simple as changing campaigns or enabling plugins. The malicious code contained in the mod also has several different configs that allow Serious Samurai, the mod's creator, to straight up hijack servers regardless of the map they're playing on. And since many servers run plugins, this conflicts with the code, shutting them down. This led to confusion in the community, as no one knew what was going on. Every thread, comment, or video posted in the Steam community that tried to expose what was happening got snuffed out by Samurai. It almost sounds like something a supervillain would think up. Make something everyone loves that hides a dark secret, and stop anyone from revealing the truth by silencing them. Want to know something even more messed up? It's not his map. The map was made by an entirely different group of people for a different game called Age of Chivalry. He simply just ported it over to Left 4 Dead 2 and bastardized it. As of right now, Serious Samurai has set the mod to only be viewed by mutual friends, and has announced his departure from Steam as a whole, before he introduced any more planned features of the mod. Oh, did I not mention the other things he wanted to hide in the mod that allowed him to sabotage people? Besides the hijacking servers and tearing apart the game, he also wanted to introduce a ban list that would stop anyone from not only playing his map, but any server that the map was currently installed on. So say if someone earned a grudge from Samurai and all of the person's favorite servers ran Helm Deep, Samurai would be able to permanently ban them from all of those servers, despite not having any connections to them. Several fixed versions of the map have been released, along with assets from the map being able to download without fear of being hacked by Serious Samurai. The dream of Left 4 Dead 3 being made is one I've had ever since I first got into the franchise. I mean, they had to be making a third title, right? They wouldn't just drop the franchise. Then I found out they actually were. Key word here is were. Half-Life Alyx Final Hours is an interactive documentary that can be found on Steam. It illustrates not only the development of the titular game, but also sheds a light on what Valve has been working on in the darkness of their offices. See, Left 4 Dead 3, or at least a version of it, was cancelled back in the early 2010s. It was reportedly going to be set in Morocco and be an open world game. We've actually got some concept art of this version. It was canned because at the time the engine being used to create it, Source 2, was still being worked on itself. And with how incomplete the game engine was, the game itself had to be shelved. Now I love open world games. I think they're some of the most fun you can have in gaming. And while an open world Left 4 Dead 3 sounds really cool on paper, think about what it would be like as an actual game. Depending on how open world they would want to get, it would remove what made the previous games so iconic: their level design, the arcade-like fun, and the gameplay. The campaigns are designed specifically to make you cooperate with your team, whether it be through panic events or environment, which is reinforced by the game's mechanics. Throwing all of this into an open world wouldn't work, which means they'd have to completely redesign basically everything that makes Left 4 Dead so unique. Then again, Valve's sequels always have a super weird development cycle, where it bounces around from strange concept to strange concept before becoming something that aligns with its predecessors and enhances what makes them so great. Team Fortress 2's development cycle is a perfect example. Like, it got weird with the whole alien stuff and then going all Call of Duty. It just got super whack before becoming the war-themed hat simulator we know and love today. So if the Morocco version continued development, we probably would have gotten a more traditional Left 4 Dead game. A thing I left out from the Final Days entry was that the Morocco version of Left 4 Dead wasn't the only attempt at a continuation of the franchise. Another attempt made was one called Hot Dog, seemingly called Hot Dog as a way to cover up the fact that it was another Left 4 Dead game. I mean, it worked, so. Unfortunately though, development on the game was scrapped fairly early on, but I have a theory of what Hot Dog could have been. Jerry Ellsworth is the CEO of a company called Tilt 5, and the company is leading the charge in AR gaming. The company mainly focuses on combining tabletop games and augmented reality elements. With Jerry having several connections to Valve, it isn't a surprise that she at one point was developing a title for them, specifically a Left 4 Dead game. The game would focus on augmented reality. From what we know, the prospective game would have been fairly different than what we are used to, with the AI director being replaced by a human player. The human director would have been able to interact with the campaign by using a pair of AR glasses and a game table that would display the current level being played through. Through the use of augmented reality, the human director would have been able to either compete with the survivors by spawning special infected, or try to aid them in their campaign. If you couldn't already tell, my theory is that this was Hot Dog. It's not really clear when Hot Dog was canned, but if it was scrapped in a similar time frame, then it's definitely possible that these are one and the same. But take this theory with a grain of salt, and not as the truth. So I think by now we know that there was a lot of cut content from Left 4 Dead 2, and recently some more cut content has surfaced online. Several unspoken lines of dialogue from Left 4 Dead 2 have found their way onto the internet, and while all of them are interesting in their own right, the one I find the most intriguing is what seems to be Nick arguing with a hippie.
Somebody's in the control room. What? Hey, let us in! Open up! Don't make us shoot our way into the control room! Come on, open the freaking door! Open the door now! You can drive! We'll all ride shotgun! Come on, man, help us! Are you gonna help us or not? What are you, an unfriendly hippie? I thought y'all had to be friendly. Is there any way I can talk you into helping us here? Okay, look, maybe we can help you. Right? Ellis here's a mechanic. No one else is alive here, okay? There's gotta be some kind of deal we can work out. Just name it. Anything. I am going to regret saying this, but sure. What do you need? Okay, that's a start. What do you need? Okay, we'll do it. Sure. Why in the hell not? Yes, we'll do it. Wow, that's really cool. I'm sure Dusty will be honored. I bet he's got a working shower in there, and he's not even using it. Always a stinking hippie. I swear to God, it always comes back to making a stinking hippie happy. I don't think we have a choice. There's the bus! There's the tour bus! Get into the garage! Get to the garage! He kept his word. Let's go. Into the garage! Garage is open. Let's go! Just go. Just go. He isn't coming with us. Goodbye, my hippie friend. Goodbye, Mr. Hippie.
This most likely would have taken place in Dark Carnival, as these lines were also found with several cut lines from Nick talking about various scrapped paths the survivors were at one point going to take in the campaign. From the context, it seems that most likely this would have taken place during the finale, as Nick alludes to a control room which can be found in the stadium where the finale takes place, and Dusty. Dusty is a member of the Midnight Riders, who the hippie seems to play a song for or in tribute to him, alluding to the possibility that the Midnight Riders died. It sounds like the survivors would have struck a deal with the hippie, similar to the deal they made with Whitaker. Whether this was them grabbing something for the hippie or them performing a service is unclear, as both seem like possibilities from Nick's attempts at bargaining. Besides Nick's obvious distaste for the hippie, the rest of the survivors' views on him are unknown, as Nick was the only one to have voice lines referencing him. This most likely means that the entire interaction was cut fairly early on. Modding is one of the biggest reasons that the Left 4 Dead games are still being played to this day, with several different sites dedicated to mods and probably over thousands of submissions on each one. There is theoretically endless content for players to experience. Some of the most fun mods are the more ambitious ones, such as Let's Build, a new game mode that overhauls the gameplay to become centered around gaining points in order to make your escape, or the Seal of Asramat. I think I said that right. A custom campaign with a very unique theme and objective. Zero was one of these ambitious projects. Left 4 Dead Zero was an extremely large mod. It was dedicated to transforming the second game into the original concept for Left 4 Dead when the game was still being developed under Turtle Rock. This series of mods would have affected gameplay, survivors, zombies, essentially everything under the sun. However, the mod was cancelled and the group was disbanded after 4 years of work on the project. Left 4 Dead Zero was rife with problems ever since the mod first began development. With the large pushback from the community and infighting amongst the devs, it was inevitable the mod would fall apart. A big reason for the downfall of the mod was their partnership with Valve. Yeah, Valve. So, a couple years ago, Valve had started to let the community play a bit more with their IPs, providing support for different mod teams that were developing promising mods. One of these mods was Left 4 Dead Zero. The partnership with Valve was pretty rocky from the start. The problem seemed to start mostly after a major leak occurred. The leak was caused by an ex-dev for Zero, who leaked out the files as some sort of revenge for being pushed off the team. The devs of Zero did manage to patch things up with Valve, but the relationship between the two parties were left strained. The phase of Valve supporting IPs ended fairly quickly when Hunt Down the Freeman was released.
You fucked up my face.
If you guys don't know, HDTF is a whole story in itself, and there's plenty of videos out there that do a way better job of explaining how the mod was a failure than I ever could. But getting back on topic, when Hunt Down the Freeman released, it showed Valve that the community couldn't be trusted with their IPs, and began to cut ties with Zero, and other mods. Now there were many factors that led to the mod being Left 4 Dead.
What are you, some bottom-feeding, scum-sucking algae eater?
And these are only a few, but despite the other pieces of the story, we still end up with the same conclusion. If you are interested in any of the work that the Left 4 Dead Zero team has done, an archive of their mods is available on the Steam group. Is it just me, or is for every game, there's always a theory about it taking place in Purgatory? It's so easy to apply to any fictional scenario. Anyways, the theory goes into how the survivors from both games have died and are serving out their sentence in Purgatory, essentially redeeming themselves by working together and saving each other. Let's be honest, there's a lot of holes in this theory. None of the other survivors show any evidence that they have lived a sinful life. Well, besides Francis, Bill, and Nick. Francis was an outlaw biker, Nick was a con man, and Bill probably committed war crimes in Nam. Along with there being no evidence for Limbo being their location, if you don't know what Purgatory is, it's basically the third option between the Christian heaven and hell, where if you're not too bad but not too good, you end up in Purgatory. You stay there until you redeem yourself and are usually receiving some form of punishment in the meantime. Okay, so this is basically just the Purgatory Theory, except replace Limbo with HE double hockey sticks. The idea is that the survivors led sinful lives, and when they died, the games we play are their punishment. Zombies are actually demons, etc. It's just like an unfun theory in my opinion, because there's a lot wrong with it, let's be honest. Like, what did each survivor do to end up in hell? So, we don't know much about Nick's past besides his career as a con artist, but the idea of him possibly being a murderer pre-outbreak is one that at first seems hard to take seriously. But taking into consideration some of his in-universe lines, the theory becomes a lot more plausible.
Brains come out, swamp water doesn't. Don't ask me how I know that. Hold on, I'm gonna go back and shoot that tattoo disaster. I would love to go back and shoot that vest-wearing jackass. I'm not legally allowed to own a gun. Okay, you screw us and I will kill you with your own gun.
Even if Nick wasn't a serial killer, The fact that he at the very least had a violent and often illegal past is undeniable. I don't think he was somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, but he most definitely has killed people. Nick references him having an ex-wife several times. This caused her to be portrayed in a lot of different fan content in the community, usually serving as a villain or some sort of adversary to Nick. It's possible that the reason Nick's ex-wife is, well, an ex, isn't because of some sort of divorce, but because of being killed.
It's not easy to get blood out of a wedding dress. Don't ask me how I know that. Careful. I've seen a bride just like this before. Careful. I've seen a bride just like that before. Wedding dress, crying. This brings back some bad memories. That dress, that crying. This brings back some bad memories. That has been a fantasy of mine for a long, long time.
The meaning behind his words is kind of unclear and left open to interpretation. He also has the chance to say that he hears his ex-wife when hearing the crying of a witch. Maybe his wife was a very emotional person that would often break down, or maybe their relationship was a lot darker than he lets on. Both Francis and Nick being criminals in the past is a pretty big part of their characters, Francis being part of a biker gang and Nick being a con artist. But these two may have a deeper connection than just this. So, Francis sports tattoo sleeves on both of his arms, right? One tattoo bearing the name of his club, Hell's Legion. But Nick has the same pattern on his ring. Nick definitely doesn't seem like the biker type, and Francis and Nick don't seem to remember each other when interacting in the passing. So the idea of them being a part of the same gang kinda loses ground with this, right? Well, not totally. Really large biker gangs tend to have multiple chapters across the country, so them not knowing each other but still being cut from the same cloth is a possibility. Also considering the fact that in biker gangs, there's a bunch of different jobs that people can do, and since Nick doesn't really seem like the enforcer type, him being part of a money laundering scheme or maybe rigging bets for the gang makes this idea a lot more plausible. The timeline of the games probably feels pretty straight and narrow, right? But there's been a pretty considerable amount of conflicting story points that has led to the idea that Left 4 Dead contains multiple stories set in different continuities. The biggest piece to back this up is the arcade game. The arcade survivors completely replaced the survivors of the first and sequel game, as they experience the exact same panic events and use the same means of escape, showing in their world their predecessors don't exist. Well, kind of. One thing that made me confused is the arcade variant of the Sacrifice and Passing campaigns. In the Sacrifice campaign, one of the arcade survivors must sacrifice themselves, but in the Passing stage, it's shown that Bill sacrificed himself, like he did in Left 4 Dead 1. This could mean that there's two arcade timelines, one where one of the arcade characters die, and one that is more similar to the actual story, where Bill is the one that dies. Now, a counter-argument many people use to brush the arcade game off is that since it's a spin-off, it's probably not canon. Here's my counter-argument. Valve themselves have never stated that it isn't. Okay, so far we have 3 timelines. The first one we'll call the Turtle Rock timeline, which is what the events of Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 take place in. And then the second is going to be the arcade timeline. That contains the 2 branch of stories. Let's call them Arcade Timeline A and B. A is where an arcade character is the one who sacrifices themselves, and then B is the one where Bill sacrifices himself. Another timeline is the comic timeline. The theory of the Sacrifice comic being in its own separate timeline is from the inconsistencies between the campaign and the webcomic. There's some shared landmarks, but not many. The train they use to get to the port is different, there's a part where a group finds a yacht filled with witches and one injures Lewis, but this yacht never appears in the actual game. They never go through the brick factory, the train with the tank in it is missing, even the final area with the bridge looks nothing like the map's version. Like, it feels much more like it's a loose adaptation of the OG Survivor's swan song, and less like it's actually trying to be faithful to the actual game. Even the characters feel off. mostly in how they look, which I don't think can be chalked up to stylistic choices. Zoe and Lewis look fine, and act like they do in-game, but Francis shares barely any similarity with his in-game model. He has no tattoos, longer hair, and a very different body type. These differences continue with Bill. He has a retreating hairline, a way longer beard, and he acts like a completely different person. Bill has always been presented as someone who's ready to fight and die for his allies. Sure, he's crotchety and old, but he's not a bad person. But the comic version of Bill has no sympathy for anyone around him that dies, only caring about his found family, which is such a far cry from the Bill that was known before. Haunted gaming is a topic I am absolutely in love with. Even if I don't totally believe what many people document as actual cases of ghosts, you can find urban legends about ghosts moving in and spooking up the place for basically every game out there, and Left 4 Dead is no exception. The most prominent poltergeist thought to be present is the spirit of Bill himself, with many players coming forward with their ghostly encounters on the Steam community page. So, I was playing Lone Gunman on Dead Center. When I opened the elevator, the caption said that Bill was coughing. Not only that, I'm alone, but Bill is from another team. Bill's a ghost. I saw a ghost that looked exactly like Bill. That was hard to see during gameplay on Infected with guns and all that. Bill's supposed ghost has also caught the blame for some events that players have experienced in game, like zombies suddenly dying, things moving on their own, and the feeling of being watched in some levels. I mean, let's be honest, this is all just people jumping at shadows. Like, Valve would have never added a ghost into their games. Right?
It's me, Bill from Left 4 Dead.
Alright, so guys, please don't harass this guy or anything if you stumble across him. Let him live his life. Who am I talking about? Well, it's a long story. I think it was a few months after quarantine first started. I was checking out the Left 4 Dead Steam workshop, seeing if there's any new mods I can play with, when I found it absolutely flooded with plane mods. I'm not talking about, like, mods that replace the plane in Dead Air or the jets in the parish. No, these were just mods that would slap pictures of planes onto really anything. Soda machines, crappily made survivor skins, and weirdest of all, body pillows. Yeah, you know, like the body pillows you're thinking of. These mods took up multiple pages on the workshop. At first, I thought this could have been some sort of weird bot, or was this the work of some disgruntled flight attendant? Turns out, neither of these were the case. All of these mods were the work of one odd individual. Werewolf Vincent. Steam is home to many people that have a few screws loose, but Werewolf Vincent stood out to me. And each time I visited his profile, I discovered something even weirder than what I found prior. For one thing, Vincent is obviously a furry, and one with an obsession for planes. I know that plane furries exist, but this isn't the case with him. From what I've seen, this really isn't sexual. I mean, despite the body pillows and the sometimes provocative stolen art used in his mods, the interest seems to be purely non-horny and instead just a serious obsession. Like his description just straight up links to the aviation safety network. The weird obsession with plane continues in his About Me section. He says that his persona was directly responsible for the forced crash landing of Singapore Airlines Flight 006. This is an actual crash that happened in real life, back in October of 2000. What happened was a pilot tried and failed to take off from the wrong runway. This resulted in a crash that killed 81 people. But his fantasies of being involved in real-life airplane crashes doesn't stop there. Following the link to his Fur Affinity account, you can find various pieces of art he's made depicting other furries replacing the actual crew of several plane crashes. Like, dude, what do I even say about this? This is just disrespectful and it's weird. I mean, taking actual tragedies and turning them into basically a self-insert fanfiction is just wrong. Most of these people that are used in these drawings aren't even aware of this as far as I can tell. Vincent loves to seemingly make a habit out of taking other people's characters or personas and depicting them as his friends. This has led to backlash towards him, as he's done this completely without the original creator's permissions. The drama continues as seemingly he doesn't understand what he's doing wrong, leading him to often start feuds with people who confront him or call him out. With all of this behavior taken into account, it's no surprise that he's pushed multiple people away from him, in which he reacts in a totally normal and not stalkerish way, by spamming them or asking anyone on Steam to spam the hell out of them, so they can be friends again. The world of Werewolf Vincent gets even funkier when bringing his, God, I guess lore is the best thing to call it? Like many other furries on Steam, Vincent presents himself as his persona, while still retaining his actual personality. It's almost like role-playing a character, but the character is just the role-player with a different skin or outfit. The Odyssey-esque epic that is the story of Werewolf Vincent goes through different genres, arcs, and stays an absolute roller coaster all throughout. Like at one point, he's essentially Anakin Skywalker when he became Darth Vader. Then he's legitimately just Freddy Krueger, getting revenge on people who have wronged him in some sort of way. One thing to note is that the people he's usually going after are people who have stopped being friends with him due to his behavior. The Left 4 Dead community has had many strange people in it, but I think Vincent's actions have probably cemented himself as the strangest of the bunch.
Holy shit!
Holy shit, Hank!
Alright, so that's the Iceberg done and dusted. Or at least this version of it. I had a lot of fun putting this together, so the idea of returning to the Iceberg and adding some more entries does seem like a good time. But that'll have to be for another night, since I'm kinda burned out from Left 4 Dead as of right now. I hope I was able to show you guys some parts of the game/community that y'all haven't seen before. I'm sorry if this part seemed a little bit less meaty than the other. I had to shave off a lot of entries for time, but I wanted to shoot for quality over quantity, and I might eventually revisit these topics in a later video. Oh yeah, one more thing before I end the night. Thank you. Like, seriously, thank you all for the support that you guys have given me these past few months. These past few months have been difficult to say the least, but everyone's encouragement and patience made things a lot more bearable, and I can't thank you enough for that. Anyways, I think it's time for me to head off for the night, before I start getting too emotional. Stay safe out there, everyone. Be good to each other. And good night, everybody.